joining us back for our second panel of the day. This is curated by Youth for Ecocide Law, and they're going to be discussing how we can end ecocide and raise hope. Please join me in giving them a massive round of applause as we welcome them onto the stage. Thank you.
All right, thank you for joining us and being here to listen to our panel. It's on End Ecocide and Raise Hope. Of course, we know with all the happenings of climate change and the climate crisis, there's a lot of anxiety going around and a lot of language that deals with doom. But today, we complete COP, in the next few days, we're trying to look on the other side of the gloom and try to bring a bit of hope to the young generations, the future generations. Of course, with the audience online as well, other generations are too invited to join into our hope. And I will start by defining what hope is to some extent. Then we can have a footing on what the conversation will take in terms of direction. So, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, hope is defined as to expect with confidence and to desire with expectation of obtainment or fulfillment. Another definition from the Cambridge Dictionary, to want something to happen or to be true, and usually have a good reason to think that it might happen. So, of course, with the groundings of ecocide law and what we're campaigning on, how we want it to be declared and as well pursued as an international crime. So my favorite definition of hope amongst all of those is to want something to happen or to be true, and usually to have a good reason to think that it might happen. So now with me on stage, I will proceed to introduce the panelists who will be helping drive this conversation. Starting from my far right, we have Adite Shetye, and she's an environmental lawyer from Mumbai, India, and works as a legal advocacy or academic task force of coordinator for World Youth for Climate Justice. She's also a researcher at the British Institute of International on Comparative Law. Her research focuses on climate change law and international environmental law. Before entering the environmental law sphere, Aditi practiced criminal and civil litigation at Mumbai High Court in Mumbai. A round of applause for Aditi. Right. Thank you. And next to Aditi is Maite. I will read her introduction. Maite is director of Stop Ecocide campaign in Spanish. She has a degree in law, and then she is a writer, author of Rainbow Warriors, Legendary Stories of Greenpeace Ships. She's actually a sailor. And a seafarer, a teacher, and is specialized in ecological ethics, sustainability, and environmental education. She has a long history of work in human rights, peace, and environment in direct collaboration with numerous organizations as a worker, volunteer, and activist. Finally, Maite has spent much of her life giving talks and lectures and developing environmental awareness projects. A round of applause for the captain. All right. Next to her is Lea, and this is her introduction. Lea is a lawyer for public international law at Client Earth. Client Earth is a legal environmental charity that uses the power of law to protect on Earth. Prior to joining Client Earth, she worked in public international law and human rights, including cases before the International Court of Justice, that's the ICJ, and the International Tribunal for Law of the Sea, and in search and rescue for the Mediterranean Sea. A round of applause for Lea. Of course. So next to her is Beth. Beth is a climate activist originally from Dublin, Ireland, and currently in her final year of law at the University of Cambridge. She has been involved in organizing since 2019, beginning with climate strikes, and has worked nationally and internationally on climate justice law and education. She has been involved in the case which overturned Ireland's climate legislation and coordinated a 2-year process for a special thematic report, the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Children, I guess, to draw a link between children's rights and climate crisis. She's at the university, currently undertaking a final dissertation on ecocide. She's an Arctic angel and is working with Global Choices to research international law, and write a proposed moratorium on industrial activity in the Arctic. A round of applause for the Arctic Angel. All right, we're going to be having one panelist joining us. We'll have a video of him played towards the end, and I will read his bio. Robert, his name is Robert. Robert is a 10-year-old climate communicator and activist based in Toronto, Canada. He started a YouTube channel, Children's Climate Champion. You should follow it. And where was I? Started a YouTube channel, Children's Climate Championship, over a year ago, and where he interviews kids under the age of 12 years, as well as scientists and civil society representatives about climate change, biodiversity loss, and initiatives to help save the planet. Robert was a delegate at the Convention of Biodiversity in COP15 Montreal last year, where he was invited to give an in-person speech to decision makers. He will be joining us virtually, and I hope he is also streaming in. Last one as well is Debbie Buyaki. So I will read her bio as well. Debbie Buyaki goes by many hats, but her recent preference has been that of a tree planter, founding a project that covers 6 of the 7 continents now, going into thousands of trees and a few notable awards. She's passionate about environmental justice, and over the years has watched it grow into a passion that now deals with legislation and climate justice. She believes the war against the climate crisis needs to be fought on all possible angles and battles collectively, each role stepping up to contribute to the collective goal of averting it. By this, she recently has been involved heavily in fighting the war on the legal field, focusing on Ecocide law to protect the environment against mass damage and destruction. I could go on, but that's me. I'm done. All right. Thank you for coming, and we will begin to debunk what End Ecocide and Raising Hope is about. So I will give a brief rundown of the program, especially to our panelists. We will have 45 to 50 minutes panel discussion and 10 minutes, hopefully, for Q&A. And that being said, I think I've covered most of the nitty-gritties, and we'll begin now from my left going that side. So I will ask you quite a large and long question that is in 3 parts almost. What is your story about severe environmental destruction that is important or close to you, especially from back at home where you come from? And the other follow-up question is this what made you join climate justice activism? And what actions so far have you taken to curb these injustices? So what made you get there? Is this the reason that you got there? And what are the actions as well you've taken to continue with the reason you started, Beth?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of a story of environmental destruction that's important to me, I suppose for me, and I'm not contractually obligated to say this is an Arctic Angel, but it is the Arctic, and it's because it wasn't the reason I first got involved. I first got involved in 2018. I had just turned 15, and the IPCC report came out, and I think I had been. So I'm from Ireland, I'm from by the sea in Ireland, and I had been in a very privileged position where up until that point I hadn't seen the impacts of the climate crisis. Like, there's the odd flood, there's the odd storm in Ireland, and it's increasing, but we're very much a global north country who's not seeing the impacts yet and is in fact contributing to it. And I think reading that report when I was 15 was what made it become very real for me, and then that's when I started getting involved in the strikes. So the Arctic wasn't the initial reason I got involved, but it's something I'm very heavily involved in now, because it was only after a couple of years of climate work when I realized how intrinsically connected the Arctic is to absolutely everything. I think up until that point it had been something quite far away. You know, I'm from Ireland, why would I care about the Arctic, which is so far from me and is kind of something that just, the countries in the Arctic regulate. But actually it's essentially the air conditioning of the world. The Arctic keeps us cool, and as the ice melts, because we know the Arctic is melting 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of the world, that is putting all of us in jeopardy. That is upsetting our water streams, that is upsetting our entire global ecosystem. It's causing biodiversity loss as animals move. And essentially, once we lose the Arctic, we can't get it back. Because as Global Choices, the organization I work for, always says, we can't plant ice. Once the ice is gone, it is gone, and it is incredibly delicate. And so we're losing this ice at unprecedented rates. We might see ice-free summers in the Arctic by 2030. And right now, while all of this is happening, to me, the logical response seems to be, well, let's stop emissions, let's stop it melting. But some countries and companies who maybe they know something I don't know, are seeing this as an economic opportunity. And so essentially what we're saying is this is environmental destruction happening in front of our eyes. It affects every single person, no matter where you are from. And that's why we need to tackle it and make sure that the long-term sustainability of that region is put ahead of the short-term economic gain. So I guess that's me.
So, is this what made you join it? You say yes, it is. And the other follow-up question was, what actions so far have you taken to continue with this fight for saving the Arctic?
Yeah, so in terms of actions since then, so the Arctic Angels, for anyone who doesn't know, is a network. Right now we have 67 young women from around the world working to protect the Arctic. I think we represent over 30 countries. And our key proposal is a moratorium or a pause. So essentially it's a 10-year pause on industrial activity in the Central Arctic Ocean, which is the area that doesn't belong to any one country. It's a global commons. It belongs to all of us as humanity. And so we're saying for 10 years, no oil and gas drilling, no deep sea mining, no transpolar shipping, no seismic testing. Just leave the area alone, let the ice heal, and use that time as well to cut our emissions, to begin phasing out fossil fuels, and to protect this region. And essentially, like I said, instead of seeing the melting ice as an economic opportunity, see it as a signal of the threat that we are all facing, and which will continue to spread around the world, and which we're already seeing today.
All right. I actually found out that with every, you correct me if I'm wrong, with every increase in centimeter of the sea level, 2.3 million people are affected. And we're not talking about centimeters anymore. We're talking about meters going forward. So I think the Arctic is something many people in climate don't talk about, but it's quite a domino effect maybe when you talk about it. So going to Lea, what is your story and why did you start?
So I started because I used to work a lot with refugee and migrant populations specifically, or predominantly coming from the sub-Saharan, from the area of sub-Saharan Africa to the European Union. And speaking to people on sort of the reasons that they had for leaving or for going on that journey. And by that journey, I mean across the Mediterranean Sea. I don't mean sort of regulated pathways. A lot of the time people would start talking about the conditions back at home relating to less water available to, go about their agricultural activities, which meant less job opportunities or conflict over resources. And a lot of the time that wasn't specifically linked in the conversations that we had to the environmental changes and climate change. And so that really was what got me involved in climate justice, because I felt that connection isn't, or at least at the time wasn't made often enough, and wasn't really present and put at the center of some of these conversations that we were then having about these movements of people and sort of the way that, or their reasons for leaving and their reasons for having to leave. And so that's why I decided to become involved in environmental law, and I now work for an environmental law charity. To get to your next question of how I've put that into action, I now work for an environmental law charity. I'm in our human rights team, and we have, over the past couple of years, been able to support the Torres Strait Islanders, a group of 8 indigenous people from the Torres Straits in their claim before the UN Human Rights Committee. I'm also leading our case. We currently have a case supporting a group of claimants in Germany in a case on the Constitutional Court for a right to clean air. And I've also had the honor of working with Adite and her colleagues, the World Youth for Climate Justice, without wanting to say too much about their work, but a great global campaign for climate justice. And so that's really how I've put some of that sort of passion and concern into concrete action.
All right, I think justice is really a key thing to you, and you've worked various ways to try make justice come up in the environmental space, I guess. So to Maite, what has been your story and how have you channeled that into action?
Well, I think that my story started when I was a child, and there was a guy in Spain that made TV programs about the beautiful nature and animals that we have in Spain. So I started like loving the nature I had it around in my country. But then I was 11 and I saw an images on TV that made changed my life. That was the people of the first Rainbow Warrior trying to protect the whales. And then I said, to myself, one day I'm going to be with these peoples. And then time went by and I got involved with human rights. I think that it all comes together. When we are talking about the protection of Mother Earth, we are also talking about the protection of all the living beings in Mother Earth, including humans. So they are linked together. And then I had 4 years like working with human rights, and then also being with Greenpeace. And there was a point that life took me to be on Greenpeace ships. And the thing is that for many years I was reading these terrible, so sad reports of what was going on in the planet. So, all of them were catastrophes. And then you see people trying to stop this. But then I started sailing, and that's when I met hope, because I sailed all over, and wherever we went to, we met people who were fighting to, defending the forest, defending the river, the beach, their own city, because there was a project to build a nuclear power station or a central power station and things like that. And then I realized that we are many people in the planet, protecting the planet, that we think we are. So now what we have to do is to be connected. And there is also something that happened is that, I've been an activist all my life in human rights and doing actions, at the front line with Greenpeace. And it was like, I had a feeling that we were winning. This is like a battle. This is a war against life in the planet, and there is a war. It's it hasn't been declared openly, but we have that. And then in this, we are winning some battles. For instance, we got the moratorium to protect the whales, yeah? And we have agreements in the worst toxic products that we have produced, like the COPs and things like that. But in the end, it's like the feeling that we are losing the war. And then I came to meet Polly Higgins, the Scottish lawyer who started Stop Ecocide. And listening to her, I understood that there is something that is really missing in this scenario of defending the earth, and that is law. And because, I always felt that I belong to a planet. I have been born in a place, I live in another place, I've been moving all around, but the thing is that we are all living beings sharing the same home that is a tiny dot in the universe. So this is our common home. And there is something that it is lacking in the protection of this, our home, that is international law. And that's something that it was like, yes, that's why, even if we are working very hard to defend the planets, we need the law to come with us. So that's why I understood that really to make ecocide an international crime that will help all the campaigns in the protection of human rights and also in the protection of nature rights. It puts together everything, because when an ecocide takes place, then it affects everything, all lives, including humans. You talk about the indigenous peoples. Imagine, like you are living by a river and you are living in a harmony with the territory you live in, but then where the river, up there in the river, an illegal mining company starts a mine, and then it pollutes your water. So it affects not only the fish or the life that is in the river, it affects all the life that depends on that river. And it affects also your human rights, because so often people has to live where they live because they cannot live there anymore because in ecocide. So yeah, and that's also puts hope because it's like having, you know, hope is something that we have in the horizon and marks the place where we have to move on and to go to. And we have to go all together with all, having all the tools that we need for this transformation.
All right, all right. I think that's a beauty with hope and courage to some extent. It is infectious. So the fact that you saw many people are fighting on the same side as you was something that gave you hope. That's beautiful to know, and I hope we also get the same infection today with the end of this panel. I'll move to Aditi.
Thank you so much. I think I'll begin with my personal story. And I didn't realize it was climate change or global warming at that point. I am from India. I used to trek in the Himalayas. I say I used to because I don't live in India anymore, and I dearly miss that. But I used to trek in the Himalayas. I started trekking in the Himalayas when when I was in school. My dad was the one who introduced me to it with a couple of friends. And when I was in school, we used to go during the Himalayan summers. So our summit points, like the last climb, they used to be in the snow because of the altitude. And it was hard, it was fun, but after the end of it, while we were coming down from the summit on the same day, um, because it was snows, we had our ponchos, so we used to not walk down anymore. We used to lay down our ponchos, sit on it, and then slide down on the snow. And it was great fun, and we loved it, and that went on. And then the last time I trekked, I think, was in 2019. And again, it was a high altitude trek. I was in the Sikkim region of India, which borders Nepal. And we barely had any snow. It is a very high altitude trek. People, when you're walking up, you realize the altitude because you start feeling dizzy if you're not hydrated properly, if you're not acclimatized properly. So these are snow-capped regions. They're supposed to be snow-capped regions. And we didn't do that anymore. And then the year before that, we couldn't slide down anymore. And I was like, okay, maybe not enough snowfall, maybe not enough snowfall. And that was like a general, you know, topic of conversation that we used to have with the guides over there, with the people over there. And then from there, I was like, and then, obviously I was in school, I was reading, and then I was like, and then I came across this article topic and just conversations that we used to have about how the Himalayas is the third pole. So when you're talking about the Arctic, the North and the South, the Antarctic, and then the third pole, which the Himalayas has perhaps not as much permafrost as the two poles have, but it's supposed to be that kind of a zone. And it is not anymore, it's declining. And from there, my interest began. I was like, I don't know if I can do anything about this. I don't know what to do about this. So yeah, I was just studying at that point. And then when I finished my law, one of my law semesters had environmental law as a subject, and I studied it. I learned a lot about Indian legislation, fundamental constitutional changes that we've had since 1947, 1950, and how it protected the environment and what was necessary to protect the environment was basically through court cases, legislative amendments, and through that sort of a story, it all changed, and that was my reason of like getting into the field of law in the first place, and then trying to find out how I can work on this sphere. And I don't want to say it's unfortunate, but for many factors and reasons, practicing environmental law is not as prevalent as it is in many other countries. So I started my practice in civil and criminal litigation, because criminal litigation was something that I thought that was impacting human rights and people around me. And while I was studying, I was like, okay, how do I get around this? How do I, get into this field? And I did my first master, and that was again I studied the Chipko movement, which is where the women surrounded the trees and protected them against corporations who were cutting them down and um, cutting down the forests, which were basically their home, their livelihood, and the source of income, their culture, everything, their heritage. And I was like, okay, I need to go further into this. So then I studied my master's, my LLM in international environmental law. And to come to your now question about how I got into this space was during my LLM in the UK, I met a few people, which is now World Youth for Climate Justice, and we were a bunch of university students back then, and we were like, okay, we're gonna take climate change and human rights to the highest court possible because we know litigation has worked, not just in my country, but a lot of countries, and we are studying those cases right now. But how do we do that? And then we met a few people from the Pacific who were the ones who pioneered this, and we were like, okay, let's do this. We're going to do this. We banded together as a global movement. We were supported. It was picked up by the government of Vanuatu, and they decided to champion it at the United Nations General Assembly, which was then passed into a resolution by a consensus vote earlier this year on 29th of March 2023, and now it is pending before the International Court of Justice. So that came into the law, and that's where it all came together. And obviously, we're very lucky to have that kind of support. We've had support from Planet Earth, we've had support from Stop Ecocide Law, we've had support from so many other organizations, and it has been phenomenal, and that's how my journey into the space will still hopefully take me further.
All right, I think I'm going to add to hope being infectious to now hope being courageous as well. And we also, a round of applause for Vanuatu because they're our biggest friends at Stop Ecocide as well. So thank you for being daring students, dreaming to take it to the highest score. That's a beautiful dream. Tell you what, I am those moderators who keeps nodding and listening and then time goes, but I'm gonna be strict with my next question. I will ask them to cut your mic. I'm joking. So short on time, with the anonymity of the tasks everywhere. You work with ICE, you work in the legal side, you work in the human rights side. The task is so huge to stop the climate crisis. And we're all fighting it individualistically or holistically through different organizations and paths. What my question is, and there's a few other questions that maybe I hope we'll get time to answer, but what gives you hope in facing this huge task before, the so-called ticking bomb of 2030? What gives you hope, shortly?
I'll be short. I suppose in one word, it's community. And I think to expand on that, I think when you look at the scale of the climate crisis, right, it's huge. And there's so many different parts to it. And sometimes I find myself, even in the run-up to COP, thinking, okay, well, how can I even process, food systems, the Arctic, law, energy transition, all these different issues that come together. And the simple truth is no one person can be working in all of those areas, or if you are that one person, I'd like to talk to you, because it's huge. And so I think having a community where people can come together and where you know that if you need to take a step back for a bit of time, or if you need to focus on something specific, there's a collective that are all working towards that similar goal of a just transition and of climate justice in their own ways and in their own fields that are important to them. And I think the most empowered and the most hopeful I have felt is when I'm surrounded by other people working towards that same goal, and that's why I think it's so important.
Of course. Lea, what gives you hope?
I would agree. I would also add, I think what you just said, we all have different approaches to climate action, to, curbing the climate crisis as good as we can. And I think it gives me hope to see that there's people choosing different approaches, different areas to focus on. But yes, at the end, with the same end goal. And I think one thing that also gives me hope is, taking it back to sort of the legal work that I do, seeing the amount of young people that are using legal tools, because I think also tying it to that, overarching issue of intergenerational justice, we're seeing younger people being excluded from the political processes that lead to decisions, but that also have led us to where we are today because of age, voting rights restrictions, but also if we look at sort of the average age in parliaments around the world and how that doesn't reflect younger people, younger generations. And I think seeing younger people using different tools, including litigation, other legal pathways for more climate action, to have and to make their voices really heard, and to show that, hey, we're watching, but we also can fight back. And I think that's also something that's giving me hope.
Mighty?
Well, I totally agree with you too, of course. I will add that there is something going on, and it is this shift from an anthropocentric look at the planet and our societies, and there is a shift to biocentric, and that is very, very important because it's like to put life on the table and to work in all from the youth, from the not so young people. Like we are coming together, we are building a network of people working from different backgrounds to make these shifts and to put the protection of life as the center of our activities. And this is so important, and we are in the way to do it. And to look at all the problems that we are facing now, climate change, the pollution, the loss of biodiversity, all this big environmental crisis that we are facing now, that we can put solutions if we all come together, and we are doing it. And we are changing, this perspective. So for me, that is the hope, that we are coming together and shifting to a biocentric action.
What gives me hope? As I mentioned earlier, I think when I was learning and studying, I came across a lot of cases, and I spoke to a lot of people, also from my native place, which is a coastal community. They talk about these changes. They spoke about how they worked, or how they, with the protests and a lot of their action, they asked the government or made the government do certain things that were in their interest, that was not being looked at, or they were not being able to participate. I think that gives me hope. In terms to illustrate this, I think it was, I would go back to the Chipko movement, where a few people who are not as educated as I am, who don't have the access to the languages like English, which is an international language that I speak, they don't have the resources and capacity that perhaps I have at this stage, at this point, and still they, with whatever they had, they fought for their home, their culture, their heritage, their livelihood, everything. If those people can do it, and if I have the privilege of doing it, why am I not doing it? And if that's not happening, then I don't know. I'm not sure I'm doing the right thing. And I don't know, it's just my conscience that tells me that, no, I need to do more, because if other people who don't have the resources that I have can do it, then why can't I? And as you can see, it's turned out, and it's not just for the Chipko movement. It's happened in Brazil, in Ecuador, in places where they've revived rivers that were dead. And if people with that capacity, those resources can't do it, I feel I have the moral responsibility to do it as well. And that gives me hope, because it has worked in the past.
Law has worked in the past. And I like what Maita said, that we're learning, we're shifting, and we're actually doing it. So the same follow-up on, if they could do it, we can, and we have more resources and better privileges to do it. So of course we all here have legal backgrounds, and we're going to take one tiny question in regards to that. How can legal solutions, especially the Ecocide law, be used to curb the environmental injustices that all of you are trying to address? So Ecocide is, in more or less simpler words, mass environmental damage committed by persons and corporations and all these guys and they have the knowledge that what they're doing could cause mass and long-term harm to the environment and ecosystems. So we're having a campaign through the International Criminal Court to have the Ecocide law included as the fifth crime against humanity. So with all this legal backing, how can legal solutions like the Ecocide law and like the advisory opinion in the ICJ be used to curb injustices that you're currently addressing?
Yeah, so in terms of legal solutions, I mean, law is essentially an expression of what we value and what we don't value as a society. And so I think ecocide is an expression that we value our environment, that we see it as a living thing that has rights and that deserves to be protected, and that we don't permit and that we aren't going to be complicit in companies and countries that destroy it in the sake of short-term profits. And in terms of how that links to the Arctic, I think it's absolutely crucial. I think if you're drilling for oil in the Arctic or if you're breaking millennia-old ice apart, that's ecocide. And I think legal solutions are absolutely central to getting, firstly, the legal accountability in the sense of being able to take, say, like an oil company to court. But I think there's also a huge amount of symbolism and political accountability in it as well, as an expression of what we value as a global community and as an expression of this isn't going to be tolerated. And I think that then links to things like getting a fossil fuel phase out in the cover text of COP28 and saying that essentially the fossil fuel industry is perhaps the biggest actor of ecocide and the biggest destroyer of our environment. And so, yeah, I think it's hugely important on a legal and a political side.
I agree. It can obviously bring accountability. It can also communicate or communicate to the wider world. There's avenues of challenging what is happening, and it's not that a political declaration, decision is the final say, but that there's still more to come, and there's tools out there to use to challenge environmental destruction. I also think, taking it back to Ecocide and the advisory opinion and the other advisory opinions as well, I think it can also shift public consciousness, because I think when we're talking about the Ecocide law, for example, and the processes involved and the processes that have happened to this to this point in time, we see the public discussions going on around it and people paying attention and being like, wait, what would an ecocide law look like, and what would amount to, what sort of environmental destruction would amount to ecocide, or what would a positive advisory opinion actually mean for state obligations. And so I think it also shifts public consciousness in elevating certain topics to a different level and maybe allowing people to think about think about some of these issues in different terms, but also in also hopefully putting some pressure on those actors that are behind a lot of the environmental destruction we're experiencing.
So one of the things that criminal laws have is that they not only said what is forbidden, like you cannot go beyond this red line, that it is also very important, this is very important in fact, but to have ecocide and as a crime at international level, it puts the destruction of nature at the same level as the worst crimes that can be committed. And it is at the same level legally, that is very important, but also ethically. And then when you, in terms of the ethical input that a new law can bring, that's very important, as you said, like it helps to change awareness, like everybody awareness about how bad it is to destroy nature for everybody. That is a wrong thing to do. So for many years we have been with this saying that, well, this sentence that says, who destroys space. Yeah? And then with criminal law in place, we will have the shift to who destroys, pays, and also goes to prison. But then we need a third turn of these sentences, and that says, who destroys, stop destroying. And that is the point. I mean, it is important to have the law to prevent things, the destruction happening, because an ecosystem, once it is destroyed, is very difficult to restore. We need to restore, of course, whatever damages has been taking place, but the important thing is just to stop the destruction.
I think I'll talk a little bit about what the AO is right now. I think Leah has stolen words from my mouth. But just to elaborate right now, the advisory opinion, the questions that are before the court talk about what are the obligations of states in terms of protecting future generations, in terms of connecting human rights and climate change, and in terms of obligations to adapt and mitigate the adverse of effects of climate change, and what do these states need to do. So having clarified that in the legal sense, it paves a way and it opens it potentially, depending on if the opinion is positive, as Leah explained, it will potentially open doors to a lot of pathways, be it ecocide or be it in the regional and domestic sphere. So if the court happens to say that no, mass environmental destruction is against Paris Agreement goals, or is against, it does, like, states have to curb that, and it's, within their obligations to do that, etc., etc. That'll pave a way for ecocide, perhaps, let's hopefully in the international ICC, but if that is going to take a longer term to achieve, which I know it's a massive sort of journey, but then if regional or domestic courts say that, okay, this is going to happen, it's the international court that has said it, it's the ICC that's saying this, that means that this is applicable. There is some truth and veracity to this interpretation of law. So I will look into it. As judges, we'll look into it. We'll see what the lawyers are saying, what they're explaining, and then, as she said, public consciousness will change. The process itself is already changing a lot of public consciousness, awareness, and I think that'll pave a way into ambitious legal policies, legislations, and judicial precedents that have, as I said, worked so far and hopefully will be more ambitious and work in the future, because we need it.
Of course, we need it. So, seeing that we're really, really short on time, I will take one question to one panelist, and we could then speak after, because we need to also see the screening from the next generation, which I would segue after the question. Does anyone have a question to a specific person on the panelist?
Hi, thank you very much for your intervention. I'm a colleague of Maite and Debbie, and I thought your question about what gives you hope kind of touched me, because actually something also that we see more and more, and that gives me hope, is that when we approach, or when we're approached by CEOs, actually, and we tell them about ecocide law, a lot of them come to us and say, I mean, a few of them have come to us and said, actually, this law could help us and empower us as CEOs. Because if this law is in place, it also means that we, as individuals inside a board, can go and say, hey, listen, there is a law there, and I am not going to face jail time because the board decides to put the money somewhere else. So it's also, of course, it's about deterrent. We want to deter further ecocidal activities. But there is a new thing that we are seeing more and more. It's also about empowering individuals within boards. And I think this is huge. So I'm hoping that more and more businesses are going to also get this. So I just wanted to share this with you. Thank you.
All right, we're going to be here after this, and we could answer many of your questions, because the topic is really wide, and what it will entail, what would that ecocide world, what would the whole UN process go to achieve this. There's a lot to debunk out of this, and we don't have time. But we cannot as well talk about ecocide law and what we hope for the future if we don't have the future with us. So I know with COP28 it has been quite difficult for children to attend, and a lot of barriers and maybe intentional or not restrictions for them. But we have an interesting young man who's really opening doors for children his age and under his age to speak about the planet they want, the hope that the life they will achieve with this crisis and how it needs to be stopped. His name is Robert, and his video has 3 other kids in it talking about how. Should I tell you or not? I won't tell you. You should watch it. So I hope we have it ready to.
We can.
Robert and I'm from Children's Climate Championship. I'm talking to you today from Canada. I brought some friends of mine from every continent on the planet to beg you to take action. We are here to represent the 2.2 billion children on the earth today. You hold in your hands the ability to protect us, to protect your children. How you will act this month will be remembered by history. Time is running out to protect a livable future for me and my friends, and for your children. Time is running out for our planet and the 9 million species that share it with us. We only have 6 years left. This is our last chance to act before the world as we know it is gone.
Hi, I'm Ella Grace, and today I'm here on behalf of youth worldwide. We are pleading with you to set the maximum possible protections for our oceans. Without healthy oceans, we will fail to have healthy life on land, which is critical for human survival, which, above all else, is worth fighting for.
My name is Reha, and this is Danya. Together, we are the Margaret Muncher Sisters of Hong Kong and the youngest climate activists in Asia.
Our time is running out. We have less than 6 years till climate change is irreversible, and we don't want future generations to live like this, going out on the streets every Friday and talking to people about how urgent the climate crisis really is and how our world needs to be fossil fuel free.
You know, I'm starting to feel like a broken record, saying the same message over and over again and not being heard. So, leaders of this world, this is your final wake-up call to take action and be the one to be the leader of change.
We need to ban fossil fuels, as it is the root cause of climate change, and in this COP28, it needs to be cut out. There are many subsidies for fossil fuels, but in a life or death situation, we cannot cut corners and take the easier and cheaper way out, as it won't be so easy and cheap for much longer.
I want my family to be safe and happy on Earth, not having to worry about climate change and what it does to our beautiful planet. I plead every one of you to take action, as it is crucial for our Earth, and every small step makes a huge difference.
Hello, I'm Benjamin Fallon, and I live in the UK. Nature is precious and we cannot survive without it. We have to stop climate change, and biodiversity is just as important too. They're all connected. But they're losing so many species all the time. The UN report on biodiversity told us that over 1 million species are at risk of extinction. And here in the UK, the recent State of Nature report told us that a fifth of species have been lost since the 1970s. The latest report from WWF stated that the Earth's wildlife population plummeted by 70% in the last 50 years. We could be facing the largest loss of life on Earth since the dinosaurs, and it's being driven by humans. There are so many people trying to protect the planet and the millions of species that live here. Conservation work and putting laws in place to protect nature can make a real difference. You need governments to help, like legislating to ban harmful pesticides and making sure we can protect the remaining wild areas of our planet. You are the people with the power to change everything for the good of our environment. We shouldn't have to tell all these really sad facts to make a positive difference. We're here asking you to listen to the children, to fight for our planet and our future. We're not separate from nature, we're part of nature too, and we can't survive without it.
Olá, meu nome é Júlia Bonitese, tenho 11 anos e sou ativista ambiental desde os 8. Eu nasci em um país bonito por natureza, onde a música, a dança e a literatura enaltecem o mar, as florestas, a Amazônia, os rios, os povos indígenas e a alegria do povo brasileiro.
Entretanto, hoje o Brasil tem medo do futuro, medo de que nossas histórias sejam apagadas pelas queimadas, pela destruição das chuvas, pela extinção da fauna, pelas secas, pela fome, pela mudança climática. E nesse momento, a minha voz sai daqui do Brasil para dizer ao mundo, em nome de todas as crianças e adultos brasileiros, que discursos bonitos não serão mais capazes de salvar nosso planeta e nos trazer esperança. Essa COP precisa mostrar que os países do mundo precisam de governantes atentos e corajosos que enfrentam com ações concretas as causas da mudança climática. A floresta amazônica tem um papel extremamente importante para a manutenção das chuvas em boa parte da América do Sul e para o combate do aquecimento global e as mudanças climáticas. Embora ela esteja localizada por aqui, é um bem mundial e precisamos unir forças para mantê-la em pé e saudável. Estou aqui hoje para implorar que essa COP traga soluções que permitam que os adultos de hoje envelheçam com a tranquilidade de que seus filhos e netos terão um mundo habitável, assim como permitir que nós, crianças, nos tornemos adultos conscientes e capazes de construir um futuro digno na natureza. Nós somos seres inteligentes e precisamos provar isso. Vamos dar um basta nas emissões de gases de efeito estufa. Vamos regenerar as florestas. Vamos permitir energias limpas e renováveis. Vamos conscientizar as crianças e jovens. Vamos ser a espécie capaz de salvar todas as outras e não a que causa sua própria extinção.
Hello, my name is Keith, and today I'm going to be talking with you about the climate change that has affected my life and my mother's life and lots of Fijians. Most people in the rural areas of Fiji still live off of nature. They eat what they grow on the land and what they catch in the sea. They depend on the rain to water their crops and healthy coral to provide fish and seafoods. My mother, who sadly passed away 2 years ago, used to take me to the ocean to harvest sea urchins and seaweeds and all sorts of things we could eat. It is one of my sweetest memories. And I recently went to see what I could catch. Sadly, I did not catch anything. In 2016, when I was 4 years old, a huge cyclone came to Fiji when me and my mother were visiting her relatives in Iraq. The wind was so strong that it tore off the roof of the house and my mother got injured. I was very scared. A few weeks before the cyclone hit, the fish even began dying in many places in Fiji because the water was so hot. People knew something was wrong. I heard in Florida just this year the water got to 38.4 degrees centigrade and all the coral had died. Climate change is killing our coral reefs and is harming our farms and homes. And the people most impacted in the South Pacific Islands are not to blame, but we are suffering the consequences. Please do your best for climate change.
My name is Holly and I'm representing Antarctica. Antarctica is changing. The sea ice is diminishing and the ice shelves are breaking. Its vast ice sheets are melting, raising sea levels all around the world. This year, sea ice is the lowest ever, leading to losses of penguins, seals and other animals that live on the continent. The sea ice is also vital for cooling our planet and driving global circulation. Its loss causes a feedback that we cannot afford to ignore. We must take action now on cutting emissions for the sake of all the future generations.
Hello, my name is Jada Nema. I'm talking to you from Kenya. Dear COP28 delegates, we need an end to all new coal, oil and natural gas projects. We need to protect the ocean, the one ocean we are all sharing, by putting an end to emission. Because the ocean is becoming more acidic due to too much carbon emitted into the atmosphere. To limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need to slash emission by 45% before 2030. You are the last people who can save us. It is all in your hands. Whatever you do today will determine our future.
We need an end to the carbon capture storage fairy tale being pushed for by fossil fuel industries. We need to end oil and gas subsidies. We need to bring an end to the production of fossil fuels with targets for their phase out from this COP28. Our planet is so beautiful. It's such a gift to live here, and we still have hope that you will do the right thing. We are not doomed, but we still need to act. We can still do this. It's not too late. Don't listen to the doomerism. Listen to your kids. You are the last people who can save us. It is all in your hands. The future isn't set, and what you do today will determine our world's fate for centuries. You might have grown up wishing you were a superhero. Well, today you get to be superheroes. Don't do what's easy. Giving up is easy. Hope is hard. We need you to fight for us. Fight hard. Make us proud. Dear COP28 delegates, my name is Robert and I'm from Children's Climate Championship. I'm talking to you today from Canada. I brought some friends of mine.
All right, a round of applause for all the children. How courageous of them. I did not coordinate that. Robert did all of that. And at Stop Ecocide and Youth for Ecocide Law, we had recently launched a child's right report. And if you want to talk about that and how you could involve children going forward in fighting for climate, of course, we could speak after this. So I will let them say 5 or less words in conclusion to this panel.
I don't want to waste a word. Yeah, equitable fossil fuel phase out now and use the law to deliver change.
Strong start.
Choice.
Wow.
Good choice.
Maybe just also because today is Human Rights Day.
Yeah.
Use the power of human rights. The climate crisis is a human rights issue. And thank you all for coming, taking time out of your busy days to listen to us. You also give me hope.
So yes, never lose hope and never stop thinking in the power of every single individual person to change the world and coming together with the rest of us and to really change the situation.
I think I would say power to civil society, because whatever systemic change we've had so far, not just in the environmental or climate sphere, biodiversity sphere, but in the human rights sphere, in terms of freedom movements, in terms of slavery abortion, in terms of equal rights, civil rights, political rights, civil society has been in the forefront, and they've used the law, they've made the law, and then they've used the law existing to change the draconian law. So I think I'll end at that.
Okay, this is going now into the end of our discussion. I'll finish with 2 quotes and 1 short story. The first quote says, "There's some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for." And the second quote says, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness." And I think the children we've just watched have reiterated that there's some good in this world. Actually, there's a lot of good in this world, and it's worth fighting for. In whichever sphere you take, we're taking the legal route. You could take a different route and still get to save our planet. So I will tell a little story about the hummingbird. It has its roots in Japan, but it was famously told by Wangari Maathai, and she's a tree planter, I'm a tree planter, so we etch a lot of our work with her. So the story starts with a big forest fire, and it was so huge that all the animals ran out to protect themselves, and they just stood and watched as it burned, except this tiny little bird that says, "I will not stand with you guys, I'll do something." So it runs to the stream, it flies to the stream and gets a drop of water with its tiny beak and comes back and drops it on the fire again. Does the same thing. Then the animals are just standing there, still standing there watching it, and one of them stops it. Most of them stop and say, "What are you doing? What do you think you can do? You're just a tiny bird. You have tiny wings. You have a tiny beak. It's just one drop of water." And these are animals with all the trunks that could carry liters of water at one go asking this question. But this little bird says, "I will not stand. I will do the best that I can." So I hope this also gives you the the challenge that you're not too small. You can do the best that you can to stop this climate crisis in whatever field you are. This is the beauty to some extent of it, that in whatever field you are, you can actually contribute to its aversion. So thank you, ladies, today for joining on the panel. Thank you for being here.